Welcome, everyone, to a really special edition of the SERMA Pod. We're calling it a SERMAblast because it's really breaking news. We like to get this kind of news out to you quickly. So toward that end, we're discussing the issues surrounding cancellation of sports and entertainment performances as a result of the smoke that's come in from Canada. We've got two very special guests, one of whom is a SERMA Advisory Board member. Christian Deputy is president of Utah. Now, when I saw Christian, president of Utah, I thought, have they reconfigured the government where you've got a president of Utah? But you're president of Utah for Lockton Companies, yes?
Yes, for the Utah region.
Absolutely. And you're an advisory board member from day one, so we really appreciate it. We also got Jeff Shulman from Pasich from New York City, where it looks a little clearer today. Jeff, I know the smoke has maybe gone away, but it's been a rough couple of days.
I think we're at the end of it now. So, yeah, we're seeing our way through it, no pun intended.
All right. Well, Pasich is a very trusted and valuable member of SERMA as well. They are one of our first members and our only law firm so far that has a lot of members. We really appreciate it, and we'll get into the subject. So we all know that the smoke has caused a lot of cancellations, particularly in sports and entertainment. Over the last couple of days, we've seen cancellations of Broadway shows, Hamilton, Hamlet. I know the Phillies game was postponed. The Nationals game, Yankees are all postponed. So obviously here at SERMA, we got to thinking, well, how does that play into cancellation insurance and what kind of insurance is triggered? So Christian, maybe you could start us off and just basically explaining from a high level what cancellation insurance is and who can get it.
Yeah. Rich, any organization can purchase cancellation insurance. It's a fairly bespoke product, meaning there's not a product where you would just buy it off the shelf and it's going to fit for your organization. These are products that'll have a general structure, but you're going to have to work with your advisor to really fill in the blanks. Do we want to insure for the loss of revenue for the event? Do we want to insure for the loss of expenses? Would there be key sponsors that we might lose? So there are a number of different revenue and or expense sources we can insure for in an event cancellation. And then we have to look at the perils that we want to insure for. And there are a number of different perils, as you just mentioned, that can cause a cancellation. So what perils are they? Weather's the one that's prevalent and on our mind right now with what's going on along the East Coast with the fires, but it could be other types of weather events, catastrophic types of weather events. A no-show, maybe you couldn't gain access to the facility. What if the facility actually had damage to it and we couldn't use a facility? Certainly terrorism type events there are that could impact, and you could customize coverage to deal with those types of perils or risks to your event. So it is a very bespoke product, can be customized to the needs. In response to what types of organizations, obviously anyone that holds an event could be impacted that. So concerts and festivals are certainly very keen and astute to what's going on with this, as are sports organizations and other types of organizations that host and hold events.
So let's talk about, maybe a test case, like a Yankees game that was canceled this week, Jeff and Christian. So typically, if you're canceling a Yankees game, there's obviously lots of things that are affected, right? Everything from the vendors who are selling products to the ticket sales to player salaries, right? And there's a lot invested in a single game. How much of that is covered by a typical policy?
Again, Rich, would be customized to that particular organization. So if they wanted to handle the revenues or the expenses for players' salaries, those are things that can be customized and built into this product. One thing we have seen is organizations that have figured out how to delay the event and or postpone it or move it to a different date often don't find the coverage as attractive. Where we've seen organizations that are more focused on it, where are one-time events, significant expense around that event, and very difficult to postpone or reschedule the event. You might lose, you could lose it for the entire year and not be able to repeat it for the following year. Those typically have been where we've seen organizations really actually do more than just explore the product.
Jeff, what's your experience with these kind of policies and maybe litigation that ensues after it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think Christian was spot on. I think there is definitely a distinction to draw between the different types of coverage, right? So you have event cancellation coverage, which is different from performance disruption coverage, which is different from a property policy where there is some case law that where courts have found that smoke damage is damage to property, which could trigger a property policy and perhaps business interruption coverage in a property policy. I also agree with them that there are distinctions between insureds that may or may not be able to reschedule and may or may not have actual losses at the end of the day. So if the Yankee game gets canceled on Monday, but they end up playing a doubleheader on Tuesday, are there damages? Perhaps, but not to the extent, at least in theory, as, for example, a Broadway show, where if it's canceled, there really isn't another day where it can be done. You basically have to make right with your ticket holders and provide them some accommodation, but it's not like you can add a show someplace. It's not as simple in that context. And yeah, most of these policies, or very often they are all risk policies, which is a nice way of saying that they cover every accidental fortuitous risk other than those that are excluded. So weather-related causes, travel delay-related issues, all could touch upon what we've seen in terms of the smoke and wildfire issues coming out of Canada. And in terms of damages, I'll give you an example. So Broadway theaters very often have performance disruption policies. I think one thing to remember there is with those types of policies, very often either in the form of a deductible or a self-insured retention, you have to have a certain number of days where you're disrupted. So if Hamilton, for example, I think you used Hamilton as an example, if they couldn't perform 2 shows, but their self-insured retention is a 3-day waiting period, they might arguably have a challenge triggering that policy. So that's a unique challenge with an event like this smoke condition coming out of Canada. Is it's significant for a few days, depending on the type of coverage you have. It may not be significant enough to trigger the coverage. And again, you have another example I can give you is in terms of the damages that an insured may sustain and how it's different from industry to industry. We represent Metallica in connection with their cancellation of their tour in South America because of COVID. They were supposed to play various shows in 2020. They got performed ultimately in 2022. So were there some costs and damages that were recouped or that were not damages ultimately as a result of them being able to perform those shows? Yes. Were there some that were just going to be fixed sunk costs that once you're scheduled to play and you don't play on that particular day, that those damages are going to remain? The answer to that question is also yes. So it really depends across the board what industry you're in, what type of event cancellation policy you have, and what the terms of that policy are.
And, it's a really interesting point, Jeff, because we're dealing with, speaking of Metallica, Chris Stapleton also canceled the show this week. And, it's a major recording artist, but I imagine that there are some artists that, whose shows have been canceled this week that just can't afford this degree of coverage. It's not cheap to get this kind of coverage, right? So, obviously, if you don't have that coverage, then you're dealing with some significant losses. So, there's that dynamic at play as well, right?
For sure. And you are exactly right. I mean, you have, any performing artist on the level of Chris Stapleton or Metallica or, any Broadway show, you have a finite number of performers, the people that people buy the tickets to go see, but behind the scenes are just hundreds, if not thousands, of people that allow that make those performances go, and that support those performances and sell the food and bring in the merchandise and construct the stage and pack it up again and put it on a plane and send it to the next location. Those are it's the behind the scenes folks and those operations that we don't see, where damages can really start to pile up when you can't perform.
And Christian, you spoke about bespoke coverage, right? Based on your industry, based on your needs. I imagine based on your geography also, that's a huge factor, right? We're dealing here on the East Coast coming out of Canada, which isn't exactly something that, many foresaw. But if you're in California, for example, with, the many wildfires we see there annually, I imagine your coverage needs and the type of coverage and the expense of that coverage is obviously different there than it would be maybe in the Midwest.
Yeah, Rich, you're spot on. It varies significantly based on, is it an indoor event? Is it an outdoor event? Is it over the course of a year? Is it over the course of a few days? There are a number of different variables that drive rates, but you'll generally see about 0.5% to about 1.25% for indoor kind of concert or conferences, those types of things. Outdoor concerts, festivals, sporting events, premiums are generally higher for those types of events because of the outdoor risks that exist there. So you might see premiums of about 1.5 to maybe even over 2%, depending on what the organization is trying to do of the amount insured. And there are a number of variables that play into that.
Jeff Shulman from Pasich, Christian Deputy from Lockton, thank you so much for this quick update on this breaking news. Please come back and educate our viewers and our listeners and our members on this important issue going forward. And Jeff, next time, bring Lars with you from Metallica, would you?
Oh, if I could do that, I sure would.
Thank you both. We'll see you next time on SERMAblast.
Thank you.